Trillium panel is the greatest.
Testing.
That was good. That was
There we
great.
go.
Testing. Hello. Yep. This is Jeff Kalen from Avis Budget Group.
Frank Schneider from CalAmp.
Doug Reinhardt from Porsche Consulting.
We worked in Calais quite a bit. Yeah. Still silent.
Oh, Doug Reinhardt, Porsche Consulting.
I feel like I either met you at CalAmp or with
Here we go.
A little too much. We also
Yep.
had some interactions with Avis.
That might be a little strong. Is that good?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We're streaming live, so.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Just what I always aspired to when I got into the car rental was to be.
Just what you pictured, right?
Internet personality.
I can't believe. Yeah, I know. My wife's like, they let you talk. Really? Okay, I'm gonna turn off.
Check, check.
Hello, hello. We're getting ready for a panel discussion. Come join us at Trillium. Come on over. We're going to have a panel discussion with thought leaders from the connected and autonomous vehicle industry. Please join us. These are all industry veterans. We're about to begin in about 1 minute, so please stop and join us in our panel discussion. Come on over. Okay, we're going to be beginning in about 1 minute. Please join us. All right, so let's begin the panel discussion. The title of our panel is Creating Value from Trusted Fleet Services. We have a distinguished set of guests on our panel today, and I'd like to introduce you to our moderator, Greg Ross. Greg Ross is a veteran from the connected vehicle industry. He has over 31 years of experience at General Motors. He was the gentleman responsible for the success of GM OnStar, and so we're very pleased to have Greg Ross as our moderator on our panel, Creating Value from Trusted Fleet Services. Thank you, Greg.
All right, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. Very glad to be here. Yeah, we want to talk about fleet services and what's made possible through connectivity and all the great things that are doable there. As you heard, I have a long career with General Motors, working on OnStar and other connected services, and now working with a company called MotorMinds, continuing in that vein. So, very glad to be here. We're going to talk about fleet services. For those of you that aren't familiar, fleet means several different things. It can mean rental fleets that you're familiar with. It could be large corporate fleets. It could be delivery fleets, service fleets, etc. So, large groupings of vehicles. And what those owners of those fleets are interested in is running those fleets efficiently, safely, and improving their productivity and maximizing the use of the vehicles in the field. Increasingly, what they've turned to is using connected technology so that they can stay connected with all these vehicles, know where they are and what they're doing, and use that information to manage their operations more efficiently. So we're very fortunate to have some pioneers in that space here with us today, and I'm going to introduce you here in a moment, and you'll hear from them what they're doing, and then we'll have some question and answer that I'll conduct, and then we'll have opportunity for questions from the audience. So thank you very much for being here, and off we go. With us today, I have Doug Reinhardt to my right from Porsche Consulting, and he'll get into what Porsche Consulting is involved with and their point of view on what's going on with connectivity today in the ACES space, as we call it, autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. We also have Jeff Kalin from Avis Budget Group. Jeff is VP of Customer Experience and Product Development with Avis Budget, and Avis Budget is a real leader in this space. Welcome, Jeff. And Frank Schneider from CalAmp is going to talk about the initiatives that CalAmp has underway. So some great things underway. Why don't we start to my right here with Doug, if you want to talk about what Porsche Consulting is and what you're doing.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So Porsche Consulting is a 25-year-old entity of Porsche, the sports car concern. We focus on operational, production, supply chain, transformation work, as well as a lot of work increasingly in product development and service innovation. About a third of the work that we're involved in is in support, obviously, of our own brand, Porsche. Do a lot of work, in support of car launch and production and new service offerings. But also we work across the various Volkswagen brands as well. So Volkswagen, Audi, Bentley, you name it. So we have the opportunity to work in support of what we call Strategy 2025 within the Volkswagen Group, defining the future of the company, the future of the brands, how we transition from being solely a transaction-based producer and seller of vehicles to operators and monetizers, I suppose, of services. So whether those be potentially fleet services, and there are many more on the way that we're evaluating, and our group is in the middle of assisting those brands and helping to define the future of those connected services.
Sounds really great, thank you. And we're going to talk a little bit more in a minute about those business models and some of those new businesses that are enabled by the technology. So looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Sure. My name's Jeff Kalin with Avis Budget Group. I oversee our global connected car initiatives and strategies. A little bit about Avis Budget Group. Our focus is we envision a world in which we see mobility being connected, integrated, and on demand. And for us, that means really making a change to our underlying business in the way we address really three pillars within our organization. We're going to do that leveraging connected car technology. We've committed to have a fully connected fleet by 2020, and today we operate 100,000 connected cars across various markets. For us, that technology will help us really to deliver three key things. One is about reinventing rental, and for everyone who's had a car rental experience, customers aren't shy about telling us what they don't like about that experience. The good news is we put that at the center of our design. And we've reinvented the rental experience with our next generation mobile app. That mobile app has allowed us to extend the capabilities to our customers to control their end-to-end rental experience. We've also paired that mobile experience with a connected car to create increased transparency and improved access to our vehicles. The second pillar for us is really about digitizing our business. And if you think about the world we live in, we wake up every morning and we think about the tire pressure of 2.4 million tires across our fleet of 600,000 vehicles. In a connected world, we wake up, we worry about 2,347 vehicles. We know where those vehicles are. We know how to remedy the situation, and it helps us to drive various improvements in our operations. So as we move forward, Connected Car will provide a very significant foundation for us as we move forward. Last and certainly not least is new business models. And so as we think about the future, we see a world in which we're going to put our products and services where customers want them. In today's world, you come to visit us at an airport, you come to visit us at a rental facility in a local market. In the future, the vehicles will be in the markets that matter most to you. And leveraging connected car technologies, that integration will allow us to grant access to our products and services to customers in ways that we've not been able to do historically.
That's great, thank you. And have you been able to quantify, or are you able to talk about what kind of gains you've seen in efficiency and productivity that you touched on?
Yeah, I don't think we'll give specifics around that, but I think most importantly, it does two things for us. One is we've found that it enhances our overall customer experience, and I talked a little bit about our mobile app. The mobile app in enabling customers to control that end-to-end experience has enhanced our Net Promoter Scores by 20%.
Wow.
So when you think about having a meaningful and a lasting impact on your business, it's really powerful. when you think about the size and scale of our operations, the number of items that we have to do daily to make sure that our rental fleet is available, each and every one of those have a significant impact on the efficiency of our operations. And so we've been very pleased. One of the examples that I use that help to demonstrate that value to our business is that unfortunately sometimes our cars are not returned. And when those vehicles are not returned and they violate the rental agreement, we're able to use connected car technology to improve our recovery efforts associated with those vehicles. And we've seen that as a number of day improvement on that recovery. And that's just one example across our operations of how we can improve those efficiencies.
And that goes right to the bottom line.
Absolutely.
That vehicle can be put back into service, I assume. Right.
Most importantly, right, it's about getting that vehicle back into the fleet so it can be rented to the next customer who needs that solution.
Right. That's great. Frank, tell us about Caliamp.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Schneider. I'm the Director of Software Services at Caliamp and LoJack brand. Many of you may know Caliamp. We are the leader in aftermarket connected car solutions. Today, there are about well over 20 million Caliamp black boxes connecting vehicles out on the roads today, of which about 10 million are checking in through our device management portal, and close to 1 million are on our platforms or applications. So today we're actively delivering connected car solutions to fleets and consumers as well too. What people may not be as familiar with Caliamp is our complete solutions. So in addition to black boxes that connect your vehicles, we also offer a whole host of other complementary services up that overall service stack. Platform as a service, microservices for embedded hardware to augment the overall capabilities of those hard installed devices, as well as applications that are delivered directly to consumers or fleet customers, depending on those specific requirements of the customers at hand. So Caliamp is delivering connected car solutions to a lot of folks even today. And we're pivoting more and more towards those solutions because, like the other panelists here, we see a world where all of the vehicles are connected, and we understand that not all customers are going to be buying our application or buying our black boxes. They're looking for flexible solutions and ways to engage with a supplier that meets different enterprise goals, can be monetized in different ways. And so we're trying to enable the entire fleet of connected vehicles. And I should also mention assets as well too. For Caliamp, we go beyond vehicles. We're also tracking trash cans, trailers, reefers, refrigerators. We've got a vendor here who's tracking pets on aircrafts.
Wow.
So we've got a complete connected ecosystem that we're trying to enable within the market.
Wow. Much bigger than I realized in terms of the number of things that you're connected to.
Yeah. It's going to be a connected world.
It already is, as you said, 20 million or 10 million that you're connected with yourself. That's really something. If you could touch on, for those that aren't as familiar, Frank, what kinds of data can you get from a car? What kind of data do you get from a car, or do you get about the car or the driver?
Yeah, that's an important distinguishment. I mean, it depends on who you're talking to. Some people will want to be interested in, probably from an Avis perspective, more what's the status of the vehicle itself. Others, the fleet owner operators, they're interested in the vehicle certainly, but they also have an issue with the drivers as well too, because ultimately the drivers are what's going to impact the overall fleet's operations. So it's important that you have both of those elements of data. In terms of what you can get off of a vehicle, that is somewhat dependent on the OEM, and so that's always a little bit of a challenge from a deployment perspective, is what the OEM enables you to get to. And so we tend to focus on things that really are around either productivity or safety. Those tend to be the two areas that we work with. So some of the data elements that I personally have looked at from some fleet deployments range from tire pressure, the amount of gas you have in your tank, diagnostic trouble codes that are occurring in the vehicle, so you can have vehicle status, location, driver who's associated with that vehicle, brake status.
Wow.
For in the heavy-duty market, your DEF, or diesel exhaust fluid, is a huge component that people
Sure.
are always interested in that. Do you have any status lights on in your vehicle? Is the check engine light on? If you're running a rental car fleet, that's going to be important to know that the check engine light is on probably before that thing even rolls into the rental car operation.
Sure.
All of those are potential data elements. In terms of deployments, we've got some OEMs that are literally picking up 300 different data elements from a single vehicle with a single data packet. So
Wow.
300 different data points from one vehicle. You can get a lot of different data off of your car
Know a
even
lot
today.
about what's going on.
You know, a lot
Yeah.
about what's going on. And not all of that data is impactful for the fleets, but they
Predictable and reliable, and the data that you think it is.
Yeah, that's an absolutely a little bit of a trick, right? We, in terms of our deployments, do a lot of overall end-to-end testing, both at time of deployment as well as during the overall deployment period. But I think that's one of the services that Trillium brings to market, which is sort of a continuous testing
I see.
of the integrity of the data during deployments, which is, as I said, a trick.
Sure. Because if you're going to use it to manage your business or manage interaction with a customer, it's going to be critical that you have confidence in it. I'm assuming,
Absolutely, yeah. The confidence in the overall service is going to be,
Right.
about as good as the confidence you have in the data that really feeds that service.
Right. So Jeff, I wanted to build on that a little bit and talk about, from your customer's perspective, what do they like about these kinds of services? Kind of what are the delighters for them? Are there any concerns that they have, or does this cause any problems that you didn't have before because of connectivity?
Yeah, I mean, I think Frank did a great job of talking about the type of information that's available in connected vehicles. It varies by solution. We have a number of partnerships, not only with the OEMs, but with Tier 1 partners and third-party providers to get to that data. We've really taken an approach around transparency. And if you think about data, it's not necessarily the data that you collect, but it's your use of the data.
Yeah.
And so, we have put a lot of effort and a lot of thought into making sure that our policies in terms and conditions are very clear and customer friendly about the data that's collected and the data that's used. We do not track any customers. Some customers may think we track
Do they
where
think
they go.
that you do, or do you get
Well,
calls from customers saying that they think you do?
I can assure you that we don't. For us, what we really do is use the location data to help facilitate the rental transaction. And for us, that provides us the ability to check vehicles out and to check vehicles in. It allows us to address transparency around fuel, and so, which happens to be a pain point within the rental industry. And so we've put together an approach that gives them better transparency to that information. But as we move forward, ours will be an approach which is through cooperation and education of our customers to what our intended uses are of that data. For us, the primary driver and uses of the data is today is operational in nature.
Okay.
And I think
State of the vehicle, then.
Yeah, and I think Frank touched on some really good points. There are things that are reactive in nature, which is a check engine light is on, a low tire pressure. But as we continue to work with our partners, we look for a world of predictive analytics and understanding what the propensity of a vehicle is to break down. We're going to use this information to help facilitate someone coming out to you if you experience a disruption in service with one of our vehicles. And so there's a lot of great ways to enhance the overall customer experience as we move forward.
Have you started to do that already, the predictive maintenance? That's a topic I've heard discussed. It'd be interesting. If
So
you
there's
got into
a
it.
lot of discussion around it. It takes a tremendous amount of data to get that, and we're working with a number of partners to see what those capabilities are. I think it's an area of opportunity for the industry as a whole. I think there's development to be done in that. And some of that may be best provided by the OEMs who have long-standing history of vehicle data
And more of the data.
performance of those components.
Got it. I'd like to touch, Doug, on what's made possible in terms of new business models and things that you can do because of this technology that you couldn't do before, and what kinds of things are you exploring?
Yeah, well, I think, for the entire group, certainly for Porsche, it's very early days. It's sort of inning one, and so anything that's related to data is first and foremost sort of in support of defining what new services are. What are the things that customers are valuing? What types of traction are we seeing with different types of connected services? And then how would those scale? So it's really, we're in this validated learning phase. So all of the data today is really being used in addition to the operational items to help us improve the vehicles. It's more to help us fine tune the different services that we envision, hopefully over time, launching at larger scale. Another way, I like to think about the different domains of data and services. So, there's this view, so the car as a connected electronics device. So that's the big, that's so much
Sure.
of what we talk about today. And those are all of these magical experiences we're going to have, where we have products delivered while we're in the middle of our drive. There's all kinds of interesting things that can be done. So we're looking and exploring at potential business models there down the road. But that's really not the first priority. I think then there's the domain of like fleet management itself, to the extent that we do have some businesses that involve us owning the assets. How do we optimize those fleets? And again, we're back to things like, you guys were mentioning in terms of optimizing operations, preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance.
Do you see manufacturers starting to get into different businesses that they weren't in before?
There's definitely going to be that. I mean, right now we're in initial forays. There's the other domain where, it's the car as a remote, so fleets as remote sensing devices. And so now not only are we worried about the operation of the vehicle, but all the different data that's being collected. There's really been no concerted thought process yet as to how that might turn into a business model. There's been some initial discussions. I think we're much more concerned about protecting the privacy of the owners and occupants of the cars to start thinking about that. And then there's the final domain, which is associated with the car as a metal projectile. And that's really about all of the massive data associated with controlling the vehicle, keeping it safe. This gets us into the conversation of autonomous drive and those data sets and business models there. So for now, our focus and across the group is really defining new services, not so much on creative ways to take data and sell it outside of that at this point. Yeah.
How about you, Jeff? Business model stuff. What is this? I mean, you've been experimenting with business models for a while already, but what does this enable for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the connected vehicles, in our long history of being a fleet management company of a mega global fleet, has put us in a good position. Publicly, we've announced the work that we're doing in and around those spaces. Most recently, an announcement with Lyft providing vehicles and services for their drivers. But the great news about the technology is it's enabling the new business models. And we talked a little bit earlier about migrating from a model of where you come to our assets and us making those vehicles available for you. Right. And we're using those capabilities to put fleet where customers want it.
That's a very different business versus where you've been historically.
It is very different. It's very different. So, and I think as we look at the future, there's opportunities for not only fleet management as a service, but data as a service, and understanding to our OEM partners and to the marketplace as a whole what type of information is interesting and meaningful as people look to get better learnings from the connected fleets.
Got it. A couple of you have touched on privacy, and many of you may have heard of GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation. Passed in the EU, but expected to set a model for privacy regulation globally. How is that affecting your view of the use of data or your business? Frank, did you have something comment on that one?
Sure. So I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial here, and I'm not typically in favor of...
We are recording.
I know. So I'll be careful. I'm not typically in favor of a lot of regulation, but in the case of GDPR, there's a lot of good that comes out of GDPR. Data security, personal information, a lot of those conversations, honestly, were not happening at the enterprise level to the extent that you would think, given the kind of data that was being produced.
So it's just helpful to have a set of rules.
It's absolutely, one, helpful to have a set of rules that everyone can play by, but two, it's also helpful to have a stake in the ground that everyone can start talking about data privacy, what's important to my enterprise, why would I even care about protecting my personal information or my enterprise information, what are the ways in which I'm going to do that, and that conversation, having that conversation with customers is crucially important. Hadn't been going on to the extent that it has post GDPR, and the fact that GDPR does establish at least some boundaries for that discussion, I think is very helpful. Now, implementing it may be painful for some people.
Did you have to make changes, you or Jeff, or in your operations for the things that you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. I would say the part that I don't like about GDPR is that it's not terribly definitive. There's a lot of room for interpretation about what exactly, how you can be compliant to it. For example, do you need to have your servers in the EU, or can a server in the US be GDPR compliant? For that, so that when people ask the question, is my personal information protected, you can say yes, and you can feel confident in that answer.
Got it.
I mean, I'll just say that as part of a German auto entity, there's always been a natural extreme conservatism when it comes to data and when it comes to IT in general. I think so with GDPR, there's really nothing new there. It actually gives us defined guardrails and bounds to operate in, which I agree. I believe that really helps. The advantage that we have is that fundamentally we're not an IT organization, and we're not a software company, and we don't have a legacy of businesses that involved acquiring personally identifying information for other purposes. And so we have a way to sort of approach this, not really from a clean sheet of paper. I mean, who are we kidding? It's a 100-year-old company, but there's a lot that can be laid down as a foundation for managing data and complying with GDPR and what's certainly to come in the United States as it relates to regulation. I think that's something that, I guess this is my personal opinion, I would expect to be seeing much more of that conversation over the next 2 years. And for us, that's not scary at all. I think we're perfectly fine with that, and it's something that enables us to build from a clean sheet and plan accordingly.
Great, thank you. And switch gears a little bit, Jeff, if you could talk to us as a pioneer in this space, what's made it difficult to innovate in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think...
What are some of your battle scars?
Thank you for the compliment, first of all. I think, first of all, for us, we have a really unique environment. If you think about Avis Budget Group as a whole, we work with every OEM. We have over 200 makes and models of vehicles. We operate in 163 countries. Being able to deliver a consistent experience and a consistent connected solution poses real challenges for us. It's not easy to get to a fully connected fleet.
Are you touching on the data not being standardized or different forms, or what's the obstacle there?
Well, I think I feel comfortable that we've had some really great partners that have worked with us on our specific needs to standardize the way we ingest the data. We've been very clear about what our requirements are for a connected car. But I think as we talk about it, it's varying degrees of readiness. And so when we started to look at this journey, we realized very on that there was no silver bullet to get to a fully connected fleet. So that meant that we were going to have a multifaceted approach. It meant we were going to work with OEMs, we were going to work with third parties, tier ones, and there's varying degrees of readiness in the space.
Right.
And so for us, our job is to figure out how do we deliver a consistent experience, a consistent operational process, in a very inconsistent environment currently. The good news is it seems like everyone is moving in the same direction with regards to the information that will be available, the access of that data, and that has really helped, I think.
Meaning common data, but also business practices, or what do you mean by that?
Well, I think for us, being in the position we've been able to kind of set the standards on how we'll integrate with our service providers, our partners, to establish the data structures and formats, and it's something that we've been able, because of our early adoption, to lead the efforts in.
So kind of building on that, Frank, if you're talking to a fleet operator that's never done this before, and they're interested in connectivity, what advice would you give them, or how would you guide them on how to start?
Yeah, there's the one thing
other than call you.
Yeah, exactly. Call Cam first. What I always recommend for those fleet owner operators is really around monetization, and that is, if to go back to my 300 data points off of a vehicle, if you approach your efforts from a what can I do with 300 data points, you will fail, right? What you have to do is you have to find the top 1 to 3 enterprise issues that you have that are costing you money today.
So real business problems.
Real business problems, and not too many of them. You don't want to make this an effort in boiling the ocean of your enterprise. You want to find a couple very salient business problems that you can solve with relatively precise use cases with your deployment. And by being able to do that, one, you can bolt down the return on investment on those deployments. You can limit the scope on your deployments, and hopefully you can start to skirt some of the issues that Jeff was talking about in terms of, 200 different makes and models. Is the data present from all of these different vehicles? If you're not looking for all 300 data elements, but you're only looking for the 4 that mean something to you, all of a sudden this becomes a more manageable problem, and you're much more likely to succeed.
I think you're spot on. I think that's probably one of the things that we did early on was limiting the problems that we were trying to solve for. There's going to be a lot of change. There's going to be more data, more sensor data, but I think being clear about the problems that you're trying to solve for gives you that laser focus that you need to navigate this environment.
Yeah, and if you're a new fleet operator, you're anticipating some new service, it's really what specifically is setting that service apart. What is the unique value proposition? And then from there, my view of this, I think others that I work within my team view this as monetization follows services. There's other ways to monetize data, but it's really the service itself that's delivered is the primary way of monetizing.
First, do something useful.
First, do something useful with that data that complements your value proposition as a company. And then the data requirements, the validation of that data, the the authentication, the securitizing of that data follows next. And so those are the things that you can't do anything in terms of value creation of services without good, clean, validated data to begin with, trusted data. But you have to start from the top and think about those few things that are most important to separate your business.
Great comments, thank you. And this being CES, I saved my CES-oriented question for last. We have to ask about autonomous for each of you. So tell me, to what extent are you ready for autonomous, and how's it going to affect your business?
I guess I'll take that one first. Autonomous is, of course, it's a big buzzword, especially here at CES.
Right.
Our view on it is, as a provider of connected vehicle hardware and solutions, is that it's still a ways off. We like to talk about it. There are huge business opportunities with autonomous. From a Calian perspective, we still think that autonomous is a 5 to 10 years off. We'd like to be able to take part and participate in that ecosystem. A lot of the monetization of fleet services today have to do with the car-driver interaction, and obviously all of those interactions go away a lot, by and large, when you start to talk about autonomous. And so where we're looking at is, how do we enable connectivity for those autonomous cars? What's going to be most important? Is it going to be more peer-to-peer communication, or is it going to be more peer-to-cloud? Is it going to be a combination? Do we need multiple channels in order to enable that connectivity?
Great, thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I think for us it's a really exciting opportunity for a number of reasons. One, if you think about how it would impact our existing experience, imagine a world where your car comes to pick you up. Your Avis car shows up at the airport terminal instead of going to a consolidated car rental facility. If you're in a hurry to get home and spend time with your family to catch your flight, being able to drop your car at the curb and have it return itself. And I think those are exciting experiences. Second, as people shift away from the current ownership model to one that's usage-based, for us, it opens up a tremendous amount of opportunities.
It's actually more in line with your current business.
Absolutely. And so today, in a world where customers rent from us a couple times a year, we can see a world where they would rent from us a couple times a week. And so it changes the fundamental model. As people come into that space, one of the expertise we also bring is the fleet management as a service, or our experience in the fleet services. And those vehicles will still have core things that need to be done to them to keep them road ready, to keep them ready for customers. And we see that as another great potential business model for us as we go forward.
A lot of opportunities. Doug?
Well, I think within our strategy 2025 framework across the group, and specific, say, to Porsche, we talk about ACEs. You've mentioned ACEs.
Sure.
That's autonomous, connected, electric, and shared. So the A word is by partner exercises ongoing. And so there are, and across different brands taking different approaches. But it's here. You see the technologies. They're just several booths away.
Everywhere.
So they're here. It's real. It's a case of establishing a certain level of risk tolerance and reliability. But I guess maybe specific to Porsche in particular, and any brand that's kind of built itself around the driving experience and the driver experience, there's a lot of great ideas that we have about what some autonomous support and capabilities can mean while still keeping you engaged as a driver. And so those are some exciting things that we're not running from it. We know it's there, and it's up to us to take advantage of it.
And an autonomous Porsche is probably the hardest one to envision, I guess.
Yes, but we have some ideas.
You're thinking about it. That's great. Well, I did want to save time for questions from the audience. If we have some, we save some time for our panel to do that. If we have some, please let me know.
Hi, I'm Louise from IoT Now Transport, and I'd like to ask, are fleets taking full advantage of all the data generated by their trucks?
Go ahead, Frank.
Short answer, no, absolutely not. Again, back to that 300 data elements, those are coming off of trucks, right? 300 data elements, and most of the fleets today are able to monetize a handful of those, typically around a specific safety application, operational application, or compliance in the case of trucks themselves. So there's a long way to go for the existing deployments of telematics devices and connected trucks to monetize even more of the data that they already have at their fingertips. So short answer is no, they're definitely not using it, and there's a lot of space for them to continue to gain return on investment based off of their existing investments.
That's great. Thank you. Sure.
What mechanisms are fleets and fleet management companies using to ensure data integrity today?
Data integrity. What do you mean by data integrity?
Is that data trusted? Are they worried about external threats poisoning their data?
I mean, I can say one thing. You probably have more to say on this. So it starts with actually, in our case, at least as of now, we typically own and control the sources of data. So those modules, those components, those things that are in the vehicles, for the most part, are things that we put there and we own and control, and we specify what data can be driven from those. So we have an advantage, but again, we're probably, and I'm not probably the right person to answer that, given that, from a fleet standpoint, we do much more work selling vehicles to you as a fleet operator. We're not traditionally in that, but in the forays that we have with shared fleet and others, it's with vehicles that we've built and we own from the get-go.
Some of the same validation procedures you'd use to validate the product then?
Absolutely, absolutely. And to be fair, I mentioned that we're not a digital company yet, and so all of us have to become sort of digital physical companies. And so there are processes still to be developed and refined, and tools and partners to help with that. And that's still in the early days. Yeah.
Frank, did you have something?
Yeah. So Overall, I would agree with that last comment, Doug, that we're still in the early days, and a lot of those conversations are just now starting to percolate as being really important to the overall enterprise and fleet owner operators. So, if you're in the crowd and you're a fleet owner operator, keep asking those questions, keep pushing your suppliers. Overall, what we do is we do a lot of deployment testing to validate the overall data flow, and its first point. And then continued ingress testing, some AI to validate the data coming in. But I'll tell you that most of the suppliers today don't have a 100% lockdown answer in this regard for you. So keep pushing, keep trying to make that happen. It's important, and from my view, there's still some wiggle room in there.
It's great, thank you. Are there any others? Sir.
So I think you touched on this a little bit in your last answer, but I just wanted to ask how important data integrity is to actually monetizing fleet services.
I would say that it's back to the quality of the service. So the quality of the service will define how successful you can monetize it, and the quality of the service is directly dependent on the quality of the data that feeds the service. So that's one answer. The other answer is that the data integrity is also a function of, again, these domains. So the precision and the cleansing and the data that's associated with what a passenger's doing within the cabin, what they're listening to, where their windows are positioned, windshield wiper, all of that is one level. But the data that's associated with the operation of the vehicle itself, even in a world where we've got ADAS systems or semi-autonomous or autonomous, that data is at a whole nother level of criticality. And so the answer to that question also depends on what the operation is for the fleet and where they're involved.
But I think each of the panelists touched on, for monetization, you have to be doing something useful, and useful is defined by the user. So depending on who your customer is, what their critical operation is, they're going to tell you how good the data needs to be before you can sell it and before they can use it. So I think that's a dialogue that's ongoing between data providers and users. I don't know if this is, I'm watching our time. We'll make this our last one, I think.
Thank you. As a service provider, or as a fleet manager, or as a manufacturer, do you see yourselves as custodians of the data or owners of the data? And if custodians, who owns the data?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we're the stewards of the data, right? And for us, it's about being transparent with our consumers about what our intended uses of that data are, and the data that we collect. So we believe that belongs to the customer, and we're the steward of that data. Now, there is a specific difference between consumer data, customer data, and vehicle data. And in the vehicle data arena, as the owner of the fleets, vehicle data is important to the operation of our fleets. But as it relates to customer data, we see ourselves as stewards.
Yeah, I would agree entirely with that. An enormous focus of any OEM or any car company is safety as well. And so there's a safety associated with the vehicle occupants physically, but then now we have another safety concern, which is their security and the sort of protection of their identity and that information too. So we are really, in the end, just the custodians of what the customer is going to do with that vehicle. For purposes of us in product development, that those data sets are things that we feel that we own and we access for purposes of building a better product. But anything related to what the customer is doing with the car, then we're definitely in a custodian role where we have to jealously protect that data and not allow it to get out anywhere.
And I think that's generally consistent with the guidance that's provided by the laws that are being written, the GDPR and others. So, well, good. Well, I want to thank our panelists. Thank you very much for your time and your insights around everything you've done and accomplished. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Check, check.